It started as a regular day, but things quickly took a turn no one expected. Imagine you're walking down the street, minding your own business, when a police officer approaches and demands your ID. You know your rights, and you politely refuse. There's no reason to show it. What happens next is a roller coaster of tension, misunderstanding, and an arrest that raises serious questions about personal freedoms. In this video, we'll take you through the moments leading up to the encounter, the heated exchange that followed, and how things spiraled into what might just be an unlawful arrest. Was the officer in the right, or did they overstep their authority? Stay tuned as we dive into this real-life interaction, break down the legal aspects, and see how this story unfolds. Trust me, this one's going to make you think twice about your rights and how they're enforced. As the officer stood there waiting, the air grew heavy with tension. The individual, calm but firm, asked, "Am I being detained?" It was a simple question, but it seemed to catch the officer off guard. Instead of a clear answer, the conversation took an unexpected turn. The officer insisted on seeing an ID, citing vague justifications that only added to the confusion. People passing by slowed down, sensing something unusual was unfolding. Why was the officer so determined? Was there a reason for this demand, or was it just a power play? The individual stood their ground, asserting their right to remain unidentified unless there was a legitimate reason. Yet every response seemed to escalate the officer's frustration. The line between lawful authority and personal freedom blurred, leaving everyone wondering, how far would this go? The officer's next move would decide everything, and it was coming fast. The officer's tone grew sharper, and the demand for identification became more insistent. "If you don't show me your ID, I'll have to take further action," they warned. But even as the officer leaned into their authority, the individual stayed composed. They knew their rights. No ID was required without reasonable suspicion of a crime. The crowd grew slightly larger, people whispering among themselves, wondering if the officer was in the right or crossing a line. From the officer's perspective, they might have felt justified, possibly acting on incomplete information or assumptions. But to the bystanders, the power dynamic was clear. Every moment of resistance added fuel to an already tense situation. What started as a routine interaction now had everyone on edge, and each word exchanged felt like it could ignite the next step. Would the officer back down, or would their authority be pushed to its limits? The standoff wasn't over yet. The situation reached a boiling point as the officer's patience wore thin. Their hand hovered near their radio, and their voice grew louder, drawing more attention from passersby. The individual, still steady in their refusal, asked again, "What crime do you suspect me of committing?" It was a question that demanded an answer, but the officer sidestepped it, repeating their demand for ID instead. The standoff felt like a chess match, each side refusing to back down. Tension rippled through the crowd as more people stopped to watch. Some whispered in agreement with the individual's stance, while others debated whether compliance would have avoided the confrontation altogether. The officer stepped closer, their posture growing more assertive, their tone edging toward an ultimatum. Suddenly, the officer reached for handcuffs. The crowd gasped, phones raised, recording every second. Was this truly an arrest, or just another intimidation tactic? The moment of truth was imminent. Just as the officer reached for the handcuffs, a voice from the crowd cut through the tension. "What's the charge?" It wasn't just a random question. It came from someone who sounded confident, maybe a lawyer or someone familiar with the law. The officer paused, momentarily caught off guard. The crowd fell silent, waiting to see what would happen next. The individual seized the opportunity, repeating firmly, "Am I being detained, or am I free to go?" The officer hesitated, clearly weighing their next move. But the second twist came fast. Another officer arrived on the scene, walking briskly toward the commotion. Instead of diffusing the situation, they immediately sided with their colleague, doubling down on the demand for ID. The crowd's energy shifted, some visibly uncomfortable, others pulling out their phones to record. The individual stood firm, but now the odds seemed stacked against them. What would happen next? The second officer took charge, stepping closer to the individual. "This is your last chance to comply," they said, their tone leaving no room for negotiation. The crowd held their breath as the individual replied, "I've asked repeatedly, what crime do you suspect me of?" That's when the twist came. A bystander stepped forward, holding up their phone. "You're being live-streamed," they announced, their voice steady. The officers exchanged a glance, the weight of being recorded visibly sinking in. Suddenly, the first officer's demeanor shifted. They lowered their hand from the cuffs and muttered something under their breath. The second officer, still trying to maintain control, hesitated. The individual asked again, "Am I free to go?" This time, there was no pushback. The officers stepped back reluctantly, and the individual walked away, calm but resolute. But just as the crowd began to disperse, the first officer quietly radioed something in. Had the situation truly ended, or was there another move yet to come? As the individual walked away, the crowd slowly dispersed, leaving behind a mix of opinions and quiet conversations about what had just happened. Some praised the calm and confident way the individual stood their ground, while others shook their heads at how quickly things had escalated. The officers stayed behind, their body language tense, seemingly unsure of how the situation had unfolded so publicly. Reflecting on the encounter, the individual later shared their experience, emphasizing the importance of knowing your rights and staying composed, even under pressure. The livestream footage sparked conversations online about accountability, personal freedoms, and how to handle such situations. While the confrontation didn't end in an arrest, it left a lasting impression on everyone who witnessed it. In the end, this wasn't just a story about ID refusal. It was a reminder of how crucial it is to stand firm when you know you're in the right.